Good evening. Has everybody turned in their questions? We have cards in the back if you wanted to submit questions for the candidates. You can still do it as we go along. You can still bring them up if you come up with another question. Good evening, welcome, and thank you so much to the Town of Bay Harbor Islands to inviting us. My name is Maribel Baldwin. I am president of the League of Women Voters of Miami-Dade County. And thank you. And we're very pleased to be here this evening to help you make democracy work. This evening, one of the candidates will not be attending. We have a statement from Doris Morano that will be read after the opening statements. Your moderator this evening is going to be Maggie Fernandez. She's Vice President for the League. And she will go over the rules, and then we'll start our forum this evening.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting us today to be a part of this town forum, candidate forum for the elections on April 5th? Tuesday, April 5th. My name is Maggie Fernandez, and I'm going to go through the rules of the debate first, and then we'll get on with it. So candidates will be allowed 3 minutes for opening and closing statements. The order for the opening and closing statements will be in alphabetical order based on the candidate's last name. Then I will ask the same question we have plenty of questions from our residents, so I'm going to ask the same question to each candidate, and the order will rotate. So whomever begins first with their closing statement, with the opening statement, then the first question will go to the next person in alphabetical order. Candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. Again, the elections are Tuesday, April 5th, and I would like to welcome our 3 candidates here with us today. And it's Joshua Fuller, who's an existing council member, Paul Rutfield, and I hope I got this right, Elizabeth Tricoci? Tricoci, great. Now, I have some rules for everybody. Right now is the best time to make sure that our phones are turned off, our iPods are turned off, and any other electronic communication equipment is turned off, so that we don't have any phone calls or any interruptions. And then I also ask for the audience to hold their applause until after the debate. Perhaps, I don't know how you do it here, maybe like a show of hands if you're excited with the answer. Okay, great, excellent. So we're going to begin now with the opening statements. And once you all provide your opening statements, I'm also going to read a message from Councilmember Doris Morano, who was not able to be here with us today. So,
one final rule, I will be using the timer that is normally used for the meeting, so you can see it, I believe. Yep. So we will start with the first 3 minutes.
Excellent. So first we'll begin with Mr. Fuller.
Good evening. First of all, I want to thank the League of Women Voters. The event that you run here every year is very much appreciated by all of the citizens of Bay Harbor, and we do very much appreciate your efforts. Thank you again also to everybody here who's in attendance and who is watching this on TV. This election is about commitment. Commitment to Bay Harbor Islands, commitment to its citizens, commitment to offering every possible service we can provide to the residents, ensuring your safety, making sure that the commitment maintains the way of life that we've maintained here for years. Ever since I moved into Bay Harbor Islands about 13 years ago, we realized how important it was just to keep this place the way we wanted. My wife and I realized this is where we wanted to raise our family. This is where we wanted to raise our kids. We wanted to make sure they went to school here. We wanted it to be safe. And we knew in order to do so, we were going to have to become involved. That involvement for me started from the first day I moved in. Right away, I started showing up at council meetings, sat in here every night when they had them, and sat there through all the meetings from start to finish. And as the days went by, I realized that no matter how many times I spoke, no matter how many times I actually had something I wanted to mention to actually try and improve something, I realized the involvement had to go a step further. To do that, I got myself put onto the Charter and Ordinance Committee, eventually rising to become its chairman, and continue that commitment to you, the citizens of Bay Harbor Islands. In 2013, I was honored to become a member of the Town Council. And I have to tell you, I think I've done everything possible to honor that commitment since the day I took office. When all the citizens here need to realize one very important thing. All the Town Council members here are essentially volunteers. We get paid only $1 a year, which we have actually donate back. And so it's very important to understand that we are providing you our time, our efforts, our commitment because of love of town. That's it. Simply because of love of town and loyalty to you, the citizens. That's every single member of this council that does that. Well, we realize there's more to serving our fellow citizens and more to actually doing all the things we want to do. And I don't take this lightly. I've continued that commitment, and through the time of my service on the council, we've provided increased after-school programs for children, hosted events to improve King Concourse, added the upcoming public library and community center, added parks, fought discrimination, made sure that your rights are protected in Tallahassee, and at the same time trying to do it while preventing at least some of the growth and density. I need your assistance. I need your assistance to allow me to continue my commitment to you. It's a two-way street. I'm asking for your support so that I can continue to serve you. And please, I'm asking you on April 5th, come out to vote. Regardless of whom you're going to vote for, it's important to show your commitment to the community. I do hope to gain at least one of your 2 votes. If you do it absentee, fantastic. If you do it on Election Day, I appreciate it just as much. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ruckfield, opening statement.
Thank you.
I'm going to move over, Paul.
I consider my campaign this year to be a 3-legged stool. Basically, there are 3 things that I would like to be able to accomplish serving you as one of your council members. Number 1, I think we have a very underserved community. I think we have a community that lives here that is really lacking anything. They're lacking physical facilities, they're lacking programs, and because of that, they're possibly causing problems for themselves. And what I'm talking about are the teens and young adults. What was interesting, at the last council meeting when this was being discussed, I was told that the teenagers don't want programs, they want to go hang out at the mall. Well, very frankly, there are many of the teenagers in this town that can't afford to go hang out at the mall. They can't afford to take part in some of the community events that hopefully are being offered them. They don't get to go away to summer camp. It reminds me of the pictures that you've seen in cartoons of children out in the playground playing and participating in various programs that are being offered, and they're standing there looking through the fence because they can't afford to go to those programs. They don't have the $800 that we charge for a summer program to our children in Bay Harbor. And they're left out. And I think they're the ones that need the help. They're the ones that need us to give them someplace that they want to call home. Do I know all the answers? No, but I know where to get them. I'd bring in some of those self-same children. Meet with them. Find out what they'd like to have. Find out what they'd like to see in programs that are offered. The other two legs, really, you could say they rub against each other. One is the establishment of term limits for all elected officials in Bay Harbor. And the second one is the separation of the mayor and the council for election. Thank you. That's quick.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to try it again. Mr. Kochi?
That's impressive. It's extremely close.
Okay.
Yes. Again, I encourage you just to stick with Elizabeth, but I'm actually very impressed. I wanted to just first open by saying thank you to the League of Women Voters. This is my second year participating, and I am ever impressed at what you ladies put on and the dedication that you have and the work that you do, which is so inspiring. I also want to thank everyone who came out and everyone who's watching on TV tonight. It's your participation that makes the difference and makes this a community. You are the people that we say hello to each other on the street and we work together to make things happen, and I'm so proud every day to be part of this community and humbled to be able to sit on this dais and even be considered to sit on the town council. I'm running for town council because I'm so excited about our community. You know, I moved here 1 week exactly to the day before we had our twin boys who are now in kindergarten and Ruth K. We moved here because of the safety. We moved here because of the sense of community. And we moved here to be a part of something that we felt was really special. I love that when I walk down the streets here, we say hello to each other. I love the programs that we have in place. And as acting chair of Parks and Recreation, there's actually a lot of really good work that gets done. We have had the privilege of working on some of the programs that we want to put into to serve our community into the community center that was so beautifully approved by the council. We have free programs for seniors that we're really excited to put into place, that we just need the actual space to be able to do it. We have slated for Mommy and Me classes for our younger population, and a number of things that we are planning to be able to assist and work with the teens, including dances and some partnering programs that we're really excited about. During our last meeting, one of the things that we had talked about was our summer camp, and adding in an educational component to the summer camp, which I'm really excited about and super grateful for staff for finding. So one day a week they'll be getting a Nutty Professor lesson, which we're really excited about, which is a science lesson broken out by ages, as well as lots of indoor and outdoor activities, including the addition of a pool day for the children. The price is $800, and what I thought was so great was that during the meeting we talked about how we could cut the cost rather than being able to increase it, which was really interesting. Everyone was really excited at the opportunity to offer free things or lower cost things to our town. As stated, I moved here right before I had my twin boys, and they are the reason why I am involved. I want them to be able to see what members of the community do, that if you have the capability, then you have a responsibility to be involved. And they have participated in working through the campaign with me and talking to people, and are very excited to work with everyone on the council to make this community the great community that it is. Thank you.
Great. Now, if you allow me to read some words from Councilmember Doris Morano into the record. So she writes, I want to apologize for not being able to attend tonight's candidate forum. I was unexpectedly admitted to the hospital, but I want to thank the League of Women Voters of Miami-Dade County for the opportunity to appear and for organizing the event. I was looking forward to speaking my mind, as I usually do, and answer any question a citizen might have, as well as to explain my stances on any issue. If you are not familiar with my tenacity for the citizens, you can view past meetings on the computer. I implore the candidates to be transparent, truthful, and to stand by their statements after tonight. You need to educate yourself and be an informed voter. I will not be able to be on the campaign trail in order to convalesce, but I ask for your understanding and your vote on April 5th. I believe your best vote is for both incumbents and keeping the continuity of this council. Thank you, Doris Morano, council member. Okay, so now we'll begin with the questions. And we will start with Mr. Ruthfield, excuse me. So, Your first question is, what is the most important issue facing the town right now, and how are you going to address it? Specifically, how are you going to address it?
To me, it's a quality of life question. Do we offer all of our citizens a quality of life that they want and that they deserve? Or do we just offer those that are active that quality of life? And I think it's a combination of programming and facilities. Do we need more facilities? Yes. Are they expensive? They sure are. Has the traffic been wonderful? Absolutely not. But we know why, and that's because the bridge is being worked on. Hopefully it'll be done soon. The one thing that concerns me with the bridge, just as a specific example, is how long are these repairs going to last? At the last council meeting, we had a gentleman that said to us that the engineers have said, well, maybe we'll get 2 years, 3 years, if we're lucky, 10 years, and then we're going to have to build a new bridge. Did it make any sense to spend the millions of dollars on the bridge that they're doing now, rather than going ahead and taking on the costs and the bonding in order that we remain as we are? Otherwise, we could end up becoming just a one-way bridge. One way from Miami Beach to the end of our West Island and go back. Because if we don't have a bridge, we can't have the pass-through that we have now. And that's an important pass-through.
Thank you.
I would say maintaining innovative solutions, and I'll go in specifically into that. I think one of the things that I find so interesting about Bay Harbor Islands is just our history alone, that this came out of a plan of one man who looked at really a space that everyone thought was unusable, created 2 islands, and now we stand here, 60 years later. It's incredible to think that that bridge that you're referring to was quoted as the bridge to nowhere at one point. I mean, they thought that Shepherd Broad was crazy for creating it. And I think that there's a lot of things that we can do in Bay Harbor, and maintaining that positive atmosphere and that really excited relationship that we have with each other to be innovative going forward is so important. I think one of the things that's really important to me is maintaining green space. As acting chair of Parks and Recreation, I have been nothing less than vocal about my desire to have 2 more community spaces, whether that is a municipal pool or a skate park or another passive park, but to maintain those spaces that we have, because as development continues, we want to have that common community space where we can all be together and share. The other thing that I think is really important is working on our continued education. I am a really large component for education and for services for our community, which is something that Bay Harbor has done a really great job in continuing to expand upon. Third, and also extremely important, is delivering solutions on traffic. We are a town that our children play in the streets, and I know that because my children play in the street. And as we continue to develop, which at times is very necessary in this community, we need to have things to draw our children and our teenagers off of the streets. And so having those public spaces that we can share and work in is going to be really important to move the traffic along and to keep the safety intact.
Thank you. Mr. Fuller?
I'm just going to first of all start by just saying thank you to Councilwoman Morano, and I appreciate the statement earlier. Our biggest issue right now is traffic and density, and that's really what it comes down to. I want people to understand that there's only certain things that the council can do, and we can't prevent all construction, we can't prevent all development. What we can do is encourage that it's a little bit lower density than what is originally projected. We've done that. The council has been working very hard to actually try and push, when a developer looks at a condo building, a high density, to lower that density so there'll be larger units with smaller numbers of people, which that also takes cars off the street. In addition, we've tried to encourage the change of condominium development into townhomes. That's actually happened in several of the developments, and we are continuing to push that. But in the end, there is always going to be an increase of traffic, and it's not just because of us. Really, a lot of it comes in from the development that's coming in Surfside and Bal Harbor. We have to plan accordingly. We can't prevent Surfside from building. We can't prevent Bal Harbor from building. As a result, we are going to have to endure a little bit of the influx of traffic, and we have to plan accordingly. Now, as far as the bridge, Paul, I'll disagree a little bit. I understand the construction of the bridge, no question, actually adds to a little bit of the traffic. But that project was necessary to get done, and I don't think that's the cause of the traffic. I think the cause was just the number of cars. But the fact is the bridge, our construction was required because it was a safety issue. We do need to have a new bridge at some point. That's probably going to happen. We're studying it now. But we can't wait 5 years, 10 years to develop and design a new bridge, and in the meantime put the safety of the residents at risk. This bridge was not going to hold without these renovations, and it needed to be done immediately. As such, we actually were able to fund it in a manner to make sure, this is a credit to all the members of the other people on the council as well, there's a credit to make sure that it was not going to cost citizens anything else, not a single dollar more. It comes out, we funded it through the tolls, and we also funded it by going up to Tallahassee and getting $1 million from the state.
Okay, thank you. Now, you'll be first.
From you now?
Huh? Yeah,
I just left names altogether.
My apologies.
No.
All right. So we have some questions from our residents regarding the business district. And they want to know, what are your plans or what are your suggestions to revitalize the business district or Kane Concourse, as known as Kane Concourse?
AKA. So it's funny that this actually came up in the Parks and Recreation meeting that we just had last week, which we were talking about hosting special events, right? Hosting events to draw people out into Kane Concourse, doing like a Saturday night fest and things of that nature. I am really excited and very grateful that we do have our first gallery that has brought in, which I think is very attuned to the lifestyle that we have. We've also I would like to see maybe like a Books and Books. I would like to see maybe like a chocolatier, a kosher chocolatier come out. I would really like to see things that bring people into downtown and create some sort of community. Again, having events that maybe we host or that we sponsor to bring people down into downtown, similar to what we do with the children when we do the trick-or-treating. Parents and children come out and they trick-or-treat at the businesses down there. But another thing that we had talked about was doing almost like a Miami Spice, but doing like a Bay Harbor Spice to bring people out to come to our restaurants and try them out. So that's what I'd like to see.
Thank you. Mr. Fuller?
I agree with Elizabeth that events definitely bring people out. There's no question, and we've tried them. I've actually done a couple already in the past, and one's coming up again soon. We've done comedy nights. We've actually had comedy shows here in town chambers, with the entire purpose being that people will come out, enjoy the show, and then go ahead. And we did actually have a Miami Spice-style menu set up and down Kane Concourse for people to come to the restaurants. The whole purpose there, again, was to develop business for Kane Concourse. But in the end, it's going to come down to two things. One, something that we were able to approve here, which are the two hotels on either end of Kane Concourse. Foot traffic is the key. That is the only way you're going to get people to come in and out of the restaurants. There needs to be a critical mass. And when you have the two hotels that are going in now, one on either side, and they're smaller hotels, they're small to mid-sized hotels, but you'll have enough people coming in, going up and down Kane Concourse. And as they do that, the restaurants will open. There's more demand for those services. People don't want to get in a car, they don't want to drive, or they don't want to walk too far away into Surfside. That being said, there is one other thing. We're trying to work, and a lot of us have tried, and we'll continue to try and work with the landlords. And the problem tends to be very often that you will have a scenario where someone may approach the landlord and say, okay, I'd like to open a restaurant here on Kane Concourse. And the landlord has the ability to get a certain lease amount from the restaurant, or they have the same ability to get that same lease from something that's another retail that's not a restaurant. And when they do it that way, they don't have to make accommodations for ventilation and so forth. We as a town need to make it easier for the landlords to encourage restaurants. That's what brings people out to Kane Concourse, and that's what will revitalize the district. The after-hours push is really the key thing. It's not trying to develop businesses that go from 9 to 5. It's really, because we have those, it's really the businesses that continue beyond 5 p.m.
Thank you. Mr. Ruthfield?
Got it. For those of you that have been in this area for a long time, you can remember when Kane Concourse was one of the best streets in South Florida. You had tenants that were galleries, a number of them. Other tenants were haute couture. You had top quality tenants. You didn't have what we have now. Unfortunately, and I'm not pointing blame at anyone, the tenants on the first floor, many of them should never have been allowed under existing laws that we have on the books. Number one, having schools on the first floor has been, in the past, not allowed. Now it's being allowed. To have physicians' offices, when the law was passed, they weren't allowed to open new physicians' offices or other professional offices on the first floor. They could go in the upper floors of the building, but not on the first floor. That doesn't attract people that want to shop. And what have we got? Walk up and down the street. See what we've got. We have to try and emphasize moving back to high-quality retail operations. And yes, we have to have good restaurants, but it's not just restaurants. People are not going to come to a specific street just for restaurants.
Thank you. So, to all of you, we'll start with Mr. Fuller. This is another, we've already touched upon the bridge a little bit, but this resident wants a little bit more detail about your understanding of what is happening with the bridge and the bridge situation, both financial and structural, and what are your solutions to those issues?
The questioner's timing is actually very good. we just dealt with this on council meeting last week. Here's what's going on. The fact of the matter is, this bridge is old. I mean, there's no question about it. It's the original bridge. It needs renovation. As I stated earlier, there was a safety issue. When you drive up and down the bridge right now, you may see very few people working above on the bridge itself. And people question and say, well, what's going on? The fact is about 95% of the work is being done underneath the bridge. And so there are workers who are there all the time, and they are reconstructing everything. The bigger problem is that you don't know the damage that was created by salt water and so forth until you start chipping away the concrete and getting to the steel structure underneath. As they've done that, they've found that it is worse than we had possibly believed. This project is now about a $15 million, or by the time it's done, about a $15 million project. But in the end, we'll have a safe bridge. And that's the number one important factor here. I didn't want to have any scenario, and I don't think any member of the council wanted to have any scenario where you were going to put any of the residents at risk for a bridge failure. So what we've done here is create a solution. It may not be a permanent solution, but it's a solution right now that keeps us safe. At the same time, what we are now discussing, and we just started the discussions just about a week ago, looking at a more permanent solution, including potentially a bridge replacement or a complete overhaul, which is a much larger project that will take a considerable longer period of time, but it is something we have to look into, and we have to determine what the cost is going to be, what kind of timeline we're looking at, what we're going to need to do, how we're going to have to structure the bridge, because several of us would very much appreciate that any new bridge built also is designed not only to current specifications, but also allows us the ability to potentially walk over it safely, because that's something we don't have now. But the current bridge can't be retrofitted, or at least we've been told it can't be retrofitted. A new bridge would be designed so that you can have safe access by bicycle or pedestrian. But we don't know until they come back with the research and tell us what the current scenario is.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ruthfield?
Well, you've got a couple of things that you really asked about. And that's, first thing was financial. I don't know whether you're aware of it, but the town really gets a huge amount of money from the tolls that are paid over, to go over the bridge. Those tolls provide an awful lot of services to the residents. But we just lost 8%, because we no longer operate the bridge. The bridge is now operated by the state, and they effectively get 8% of the tolls that are generated for the bridge. So we can look at it from the standpoint we just lost 8% of our income. I disagree with one thing, Josh. I don't think what they're doing now is a solution. I think it was a Band-Aid. And all you're doing is putting a Band-Aid on a sore. The solution should have been, from the beginning, a permanent one, not covered by a Band-Aid. The financials, I don't know what the state will be willing to contribute, because that's an expensive operation, very expensive, and I understand that. And there will be loss of the bridge use for a while, which will cause a further financial pain. You will not be able to use the bridge and construct a new bridge in the same place at the same time. Just can't be physically done. So I think it's important that some really fast planning be done and some expensive planning.
Thank you. Ms. Tarkochi?
Thank you. I think it's going to be difficult to explain more than what Councilman Fuller has already stated. The project is costing approximately $15 million. It should be done in August. It has been far more than it sounds like anyone really anticipated that it would be, and it's been an extensive amount of work. From what I have seen and what I have read, it's essentially that as they go in and open up more, there seem to be more and more issues that come about through that process. I did like some of the ideas that I heard at the last council meeting, such as either increasing the toll for large and heavy vehicles, or just having a weight limit on the bridge to help maintain and keep that life as long as we possibly can. I think it can be easily agreed that this is something that we had to do. As a town, having a safe way that we can have our motorists pass back and forth is the most important. Safety has to be first. Like I tell my kids, wear your helmet, safety first. You can look cool later. Ultimately, I think at this point we need to start putting away money, right? We know that we need to get a new bridge at some point, and if we can be as financially prudent about that as possible, that would be great. Once the studies come back, I think that we'll have, the engineers' opinions, those people who have gotten their degrees in this, to help us understand what our options are and what the best ways to proceed are. But I do think at this point the town needs to start to take some of that revenue that we're getting and put it aside, because at some point we will need a new bridge.
Okay, thank you.
My question, under the rules, am I allowed to respond to a comment?
No,
Okay.
but in the closing statement,
In the closing?
or you could slide it into an answer, I don't know. But no rebuttal here.
Okay, I'll stick to the rules.
Okay, so the next question, we'll start with Mr. Ruthfield, and it kind of ties into what has already been discussed, which is traffic and getting pedestrians out into the business district and safety. So this is one of the residents' question, and it deals with traffic safety. What ideas do you have, or what can we do in order to make our streets safer for pedestrians and to have cars slow down? This one particularly is east-west on Bay Harbor Drive, but it could be the entire...
Well, what we could do is something like Miami Beach did, if you want to do that, because it causes, there's probable more, as much dismay with the solution as there is before the solution. And one of the solutions Miami Beach did on both LaGorce Drive and on Pine Tree Drive, because of such speeding problems as they had, was the installation of speed bumps. You know, that slows people down a lot, because when you're going 25 miles an hour and hit a speed bump, it's one thing. Go 40 miles an hour, and you may hit the top of your car. Other than that, the only thing you can do is not allow cars to drive certain places, which I don't think is practical or realistic. The only thing that I would be concerned about is, will what we have now cause accidents and possibly deaths? And what I'm talking about is children from the age of probably 8 or 9 years old up through teenagers, playing in the streets and on the roads with no supervision. If you want to see where teenagers are, anytime you want to go, when the kids aren't in school, go over to the shopping center on 95th Street. You'll find them riding bikes, riding their skateboards, and doing all kinds of other things. And there's even a better place that they've told me about. They go to the garage in the evenings, and they use the garage ramps to use for their bikes and skateboarding.
Thank you. Mr. Kochi?
So I think first and foremost, something that's really important to note is that most of the people who speed, at least on this island, which I can speak to because I live here, are not residents of the island. I can tell you that I have noticed that people are driving faster, but I will tell you that just with minor discussions with our police force, the increased police presence, particularly at least in the area that I live in, has made a very big difference. Again, my children do play in the street, and I can tell you that over the last 18 months, there have been a couple times where someone has driven really fast down 102nd Street, of all streets, which is not a main road here. And so we have had parents that have come out and we are in the streets with our children. So I think, first and foremost, having that really close relationship with the police department is really important. They are great people and in a lot of ways are really responsive to things. Anytime that I've spoken to anyone on the force with any issues that I've had, they have been really proactive and engaged in finding a solution and making something work. So that's much a compliment to them. I do think that we as parents need to be really aware of what our children are doing as well. I think looking into a partnership maybe with the school and the PTA to see if there's something that we can do. Maybe it's a safety campaign with the children. Maybe have parents volunteer to be on the corners during high times when children are walking to and from school, because we are a pedestrian community. So many of our children walk to and home from school, particularly in the morning hours. The other thing that I think is really important is maybe expanding the area where we have lower speed limits, particularly in the times when individuals are out and it's high traffic, is lowering those speed limits in the interiors of the island when you do have large amounts of children that are walking to and home from school.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fuller?
I think it starts with enforcement. I'm not in favor of the speed bumps. One of the problems with speed bumps when you put them up and down on some of those roads is that a lot of times the people that will be speeding will very often just kind of swerve around the speed bump. And when they swerve around the speed bump, they're now in the pedestrian area. So I think it puts people more at risk. I think if people are going to just disregard safety anyways, they're going to go that extra step and put people into real grave danger. And I won't accept that as a concept. Regardless, I mean, like I said, enforcement's going to be the key, and we can keep on pushing for that. And I think, something Elizabeth said is right. A lot of the speeders, not all, but a lot of the speeders are people from outside Bay Harbor, because neighbors don't generally want to look a neighbor in the eye as they're speeding past them and almost hitting a kid. But an outsider doesn't have the same regard for our citizens. So I think that is the way to start, is with the enforcement. One of the other things we might want to look at, and I think would be probably a good start, is a lot of the traffic is backed up, especially after school, because I don't think we have it timed right with the crossings. When the crossing guards do a wonderful job of setting up the crossings with the certain right time of the lights, I don't think is done perfectly well right now. And I think that would actually increase safety and also probably improve traffic a little bit if we can retime that. And I'm not talking about timing the lights, but I'm talking more along the lines of what we have is we'll have the green, and then all of a sudden when it turns green, the other side of the crosswalk comes and blocks it. It's just a matter of coordinating that a little bit better, which I think will help the flow and also safety a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. All right, next question from our residents here, and we will begin with Ms. Tricoci, right? Yes, it's your turn. I want to make sure I got that right. So this question is from a resident, and it's specific to the impact. What do you believe, or please address the impact of the proposed design of the Church by the Sea? What would be the impact on our town?
Okay.
Do you know about that project?
Yes, I do.
Okay, like, what would be the impact?
So I think a couple of things, right? We're talking about communal spaces, number one. So bringing people into the town is always positive, particularly populations that may be using our restaurants afterwards and using King Concourse after they complete whatever services they have. What I think is really great is that the Church by the Sea, in my understanding of what the plan is, would be on the second floor, and there would be approximately 10,000 square feet of retail space underneath it, because as Mr. Ruthfield pointed out, we can't have those on the first floor. So it would provide for a number of great spaces for shops to come in, helping to revitalize King Concourse, and adding that additional foot traffic that we're talking about to bring people in to utilize the services that we have and showcase to some extent Bay Harbor Islands. So that is how I view the impact of that development.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fuller?
There's no way around it. The impact's going to be significant. It's straightforward. The current plan, as I've seen it, is that the church is going to be built. Current plans are where Ocean Cadillac is. You will have retail on the ground floor, and the church will be the second and third floor with potentially a playground or some other gathering area up top on the roof. You're talking about a significant number of people congregating, generally on obviously Sunday mornings, on the corner of, right off the corner of King Concourse, and there will be an impact. There's no way around it. That being said, there's only certain things that we can do, and one of the things I've asked for, and I've actually spoken with the reverend of the church as well, and we've actually as a council have requested it as well, is a conversation, because we want that conversation to be from between the church and the residents. And it's very important right now, I believe, and I think a lot of other people believe, that residents have the opportunity to understand exactly what is planned before it goes in, and not just be surprised when something just suddenly appears and the plans are already finalized. If the church, and from the impression they give me that they want to be good neighbors, I think part of that neighborly attitude is to go ahead and say, look, this is what we're planning. Is there something that is good that you can suggest that can help us, or is there something you don't like? And I think that interaction is imperative in this situation rather than waiting further down the line. And it's getting further down the line. So I know that we are looking into the possibility, and we've invited the church to come speak to residents. And please, if you're watching this, if any residents or the residents that are watching this, tell your neighbors, tell everybody that when we have an event here to address the issues with the church, that you do appear and you show up here and you tell the church what you like and what you don't like, so that they can try and accommodate what we want as a town. Because, quite honestly, there's no way around it, but it's going to be a significant change to the community.
Thank you. Mr. Ruthfield?
I agree totally with Josh, frankly, except for one thing. The first floor on the plans shows 1,800 square feet being used by the church. That's a big chunk of the so-called retail space that it's going to be used.
Entranceway, that's it.
1,800 square feet? No, Josh, that's more than just an entranceway. Anyways, yes, there will be problems. Yes, there will be situations. There are situations right now on the island. I don't know whether you're aware of it or you're aware of it, but we have actually had a situation or two occur where the people that used the church as a place for homeless. They used to just hang out there. Since they don't have the church anymore to hang around, guess where they've come? Now, the reality is, the church has always been a good neighbor. The church provided many of the organizations from Bay Harbor a place to go when we had no place. And I understand and appreciate that. But I think there's more problems that are going to show up than we've looked at. In addition, some of the neighbors have complained that the church itself, through its own outreach programs, will attract people coming to our community that will hurt the community, not help it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next question, we're going to start with Mr. Fuller. And we've heard a lot about open spaces and programming and parks and special events to bring people out into the business district. But specifically, we have a resident who is interested in knowing what are your specific ideas for the younger citizens to become more involved in parks programming or in events. What are your ideas to engage them?
Well, the first thing before you engage them and determine what courses or what you're going to provide, you have to have a place to do so. And that's what we've addressed. That was the first step, and we needed to do that, and we did that. We've, over the last few years, been able to obtain the right funds and actually plan and start construction of the community center. And that's going to be our focus, is to put a lot of the programs within that center and the public library, because it gives us a location to sit down, create whatever we want to do in essentially open space area, provide us the technology to do so, and provide us the ability to offer a wide variety of these services. That being said, there are other things we can provide throughout the community, and I think part of it is actually tied into what we talked about earlier with Up and Down and Kane Concourse. Because as we find more foot traffic, as we find more activity on Kane Concourse, we can find, whether it be activities and events that we run up and down on Kane Concourse, whether it is events that we run at some of the park spaces that we've opened over the last few years. And I can tell you, we did a lot of work to get the 98th Street Park opened, and now we have a facility there. In other words, we have a place you can actually hold events there. That's the key. Because we always have one disadvantage here, and unfortunately it's just true. We have our paradise here in Bay Harbor, but the last word in our name is the key problem: islands. We don't have the space to do everything, so we have to make the best use of the space we have, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide as much as possible for all ages, not just kids, adults, seniors, everyone, but we need the facilities to do it, and now we've got past that step. When we open the community center later this year, and now that we have the parks open, I think we can offer a lot more services.
Okay, thank you. Same question to Mr. Ruthfield.
I'll go back to my same group that I seem to be alone in wanting to help, and that's the teenagers and the young adults in our community. I think there is an answer. It's used all over the country in major cities. We have a piece of property that we own that's currently used for staging of construction. In other words, trucks go in and equipment goes in, things like that. I would like to suggest that the town take a look and have possibly even minuscule plans. I don't want them to go out and do a whole hiring of all these so-called experts, of building what you and I and many others used when we were growing up, and that was YMCA and YMHA type of facilities. I mean, I can picture them, but I'm not an expert, even though I've built them. One of the things I always look at is these buildings that had, for example, on the first floor was the basketball court. Around the ceiling of the first floor was a running track. So you had both of those areas kind of looked at. And on another floor, or an extension on one of the floors, you had maybe a workout room with somebody looking over that workout room and being able to offer those facilities. And you had meeting rooms, not meeting rooms for seniors to hold their senior meetings, not meeting rooms for, let's call them juniors, to have their meetings,
Thank you.
but for everybody.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you for bringing that up. I think one of the things that's so important in any community is that every population is reflected. And so, there have been just some really exciting discussions. Some of them are more infantile and more spur of the moment than others, but some of the things that I'd really like to see, and I've been very vocal about, is I would like to see a skate park in Bay Harbor Islands. I would like to see potentially a municipal pool or another community space that we have. I do agree that having that community center open is going to change the face of Bay Harbor, and there are so many programs that, as stated earlier, we have slated and we want to be able to provide, but literally the space that we are in right now is the only space that we have to do them. So we can't do the senior programs like we want to do, which are like the diabetes health and the careful to make sure that you don't fall, and building strength in seniors, all three programs that we want to be able to provide that we literally just don't have the space to do right now. I do agree that having that library is going to, again, additionally enrich the community. I do think we can also do things like public-private partnerships. You know, one of the things I love about Bay Harbor is our Police Explorers program, which I think is so exciting, and I really commend the parents who get their teenagers involved in this program, because it's a great way to direct the tenacity of young children, as I like to say it, into something positive. Look, I have a 5-year-old who's extremely tenacious. He's very driven, and I can tell you there's a constant communication in our house about how to take that natural inclination that he has and make it something positive and drive it towards something that's going to produce desired outcomes for him and help him to, you know, be proud of who he is rather than feeling caged in this great creativity that he has. And I think we can do that in our community as well. We can look to our restaurants and maybe do like little chef programs during the day where they're maybe not serving lunch, or on weekends, maybe when they aren't in high volume, have the kids and have the teenagers come in who are interested in our culinary arts. Maybe look at a public-private partnership with Johnson & Wales. Maybe do things like that so that we can engage children in something positive rather than something negative.
Okay, thank you very much. So for this next question, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we have questions from some residents regarding term limits. And the question is, do you believe there should be term limits implemented in Bay Harbor Islands? And if so, why do you believe that those term limits are necessary? And we will start with Mr. Ruthfield.
Yes, I do believe term limits are necessary. I've always believed term limits are necessary. And what's strange is I had agreement from people 2 years ago that they were in favor of term limits, but unfortunately their minds changed just when they went to vote. Term limits allow you to bring in new ideas. Term limits allow new ideas to enter into the political arena, not just redoing the same ideas over and over again because they're favorites of people's. I think term limits have proven in every branch of the government that they are valuable and they should be had. From the presidency on down, effectively it's term limits. Only allowed to serve 2 terms. Term limits are now being discussed in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. Term limits are in place in many, many political organizations. I believe the only way you grow is by growing the people that are in your community, allowing them to take part and feel part of the community and use their ideas that can become very valuable ones in changing your community for the better.
Thank you. Mr. Cochi?
I think this is a very hot-button issue, and it's one that was also discussed last year. I think first and foremost, it needs to go to the voters. I think the voters need to decide if they want to have term limits and what they feel those term limits should be. I think that it's a decision of the population that lives here, and as the community, they should be making that decision. And I would be for putting it on a ballot and seeing what they think about it, for them to be the ones who make that call. I'm not against term limits. I think that there are definitely positives. I think there are also consequences that we have, in that this is a very specific position. It's a very specific knowledge base, and it's a very specific commitment. But as I said, I think first and foremost, the community needs to make the decision whether or not they want to have the term limits.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fuller?
I'm not in favor of term limits, and I'll tell you why. We looked at it. Originally, I had thought about it when I was on Charter and Ordinance Committee, and we looked at it and we realized there were some problems with it as they adhere to our community. First of all, the fact of the matter is we've had several elections where nobody's running. So it's not as if there is a scenario where there's a huge rush of people all trying to get in. I mean, this is a unique situation. We have 4 people this time, but, including Doris, obviously. But the fact of the matter is this is a different type of situation. In fact, one of the really weird statistics here is that it's not based on how much you raise or as an incumbent or anything like that. It's either the last 4 or 5, and I'd have to check this, either the last 4 or 5 elections, the person who has spent the least has won every time. That's what happens in Bay Harbor. It's, you know your neighbors, you know who you like, you know who you support, and that's all it takes. It depends on whether or not you're willing to go out there and meet everybody and talk to everybody, and that's what, essentially puts you in office here to serve the community. This is not a scenario like Congress or something where you're representing as a member of the House of Representatives. You're essentially, I think it's 550,000 people right now for each individual member of Congress. You're not going to meet everybody. It's a very different scenario. As far as new ideas, I don't think we've ever been closed to new ideas in Bay Harbor. And anybody who's come up and spoken at a council meeting that's had a new idea that we like, everybody's moved forward on it. I got to tell you also, institutional knowledge here is very key. We have a couple members of the council that have served one for over 20 years and one for almost 20 years, and their knowledge when it comes to factors that have happened years before has been an immense help. And ironically, Linda, your significant other, who is the former mayor, who actually shows up for quite a few of the meetings, quite often she's kind enough to grace us with her presence, and she provides guidance for things that she remembers back for when she was running the town, and it helps a lot. I would never want to give that knowledge up.
Okay, thank you. So our next question, we'll start with Ms. Tricoci, and it's about sea level rise. This is a coastal community, and it is surrounded by water, and there's millions or billions of dollars invested, property invested in the town. South Florida has also been named Ground Zero to experience the effects of sea level rise. So if elected, how would you go about addressing this imminent threat, and what type of mitigation or adaptation measures would you take as a council person?
I think first and foremost, one thing that we have done and need to continue to do is to increase the seawalls. Number one, we are a coastal community. We are 2 islands, 3 islands, give or take, that need to continue to increase that. We did spend quite a bit of money over the last 7 years to work on our drainage systems. I think it's something that we need to continue to do, and we can look at our communities that are nearby and see what they have done that has worked for them and has not worked for them, to be able to move forward from there. In speaking to some of the residents, some of the things that were talked about were maybe increasing the height of the streets to assist in some of the flooding issues that we have. But I think first and foremost, we need to get engineers, right? We need to get environmentalists. We need to get people in who are educated to tell us what the best way to handle this is. Because the reality is, I'm a business person. You have people who are attorneys, they're doctors. We are by no means engineers, and so we need to tap the people who are at the forefront in doing this to tell us how not just to maintain our community, but how to ensure its safety going forward.
Okay, Thank you. Mr. Fuller?
There's no question that this is a hazard for us. There's no way around it. The problem is there's only a certain amount we can do. And, I don't want to tell you something that's not true. So the fact of the matter is we only can do a certain amount. As far as what we have done, Elizabeth's right, what we did just very recently is we raised the minimum requirement for the seawalls. So anybody that is actually retrofitting, repairing over a certain percentage, or replacing their seawall had to raise it an additional foot. Eventually, the concept is it means the entire outside perimeter of the islands will be a foot higher. The problem is water still seeps up underneath from the drains. Our drains are based on gravity. And unfortunately, when the water's higher from the outside, it will come up and go, you see it up in the middle of the street. We are looking into and we're trying to see and price what can be done to try and make it so that it's a one-way flow. I don't want to tell you that we're definitely going to get that done. We're going to try. We're going to see what the costs are and see what we can do. As technology improves for that, then yes, then something will get done. But I don't find it necessarily the best idea to throw a lot of money at a technology if we don't have it now that's not really going to do much. If we can get one that actually does stop the flow, absolutely. Then that's what we need to do. Now, as far as pushing the height of the streets, that I would disagree with you on this, but only because, at least in my mindset, if you make the streets higher, then the water is going to come down from the streets towards the homes. I wouldn't want that. And I agree with you that we have to talk to the engineers and go from there, but there's only so much we can do. Pumps that Miami Beach are put in, people have asked me, can we do the pumps at Miami Beach? The answer is probably not. The fact of the matter is Miami Beach's budget is considerably higher, and at the same time, they have the locations to put them. Again, like I said earlier, we have a limited amount of space, and we don't have the ability to put pumping stations up and down on every single street. So we have to make the best of a bad situation and see what the technology that's available to us can provide us as far as additional protection while we raise the seawalls. Other than that, there's not much we can do at the moment.
Thank you. Mr. Ruthfield?
Unfortunately, Josh is correct. You have a situation with two islands with other bridges and other places that water can enter, that you can never seal off the islands. You can never seal the island totally. Take either one of the main islands and imagine putting a 5-foot wall around it to hopefully hold back the water. Well, guess what? There's a bridge that's got to take you from one to the other. Well, if you have to have that bridge, guess where the water is going to go? Right to where the bridge is. And it'll flow in that way. To continually raise the height of the seawalls won't work. You know that. I know that. And everybody else that's looked at it knows it. Unfortunately, if the doomsayers are correct, if we really are going to have this massive rise in sea level, there really is very little, if anything, that I believe will ever be able to be done in this situation.
Okay. Thank you. And next it will go to Mr. Fuller. And it's a follow-up question from the sea level rise question, but really it could, it goes beyond that. It can extend to many different issues, such as traffic. Which level of government do you believe should be responsible for addressing issues like traffic and like sea level rise? And what type of, how would you go about reaching out to your colleagues at those different levels of government?
The answer is every level. I don't think you can kick the can down to the next level of government. I think you have to take responsibility. We have to do a certain amount here. There's certain parts that can't be done here. It has to be done at the next state level. And there's certain parts that have to be done at the federal level. But we can't say to them, okay, you do everything, we do nothing. It doesn't work that way. So with regard to sea level, we're doing what we can. Like I said earlier, whether it be a little bit of the seawall, and I agree with Paul that seawall doesn't cure it, but it does help a little bit to try and create certain areas where water doesn't come over. When we look at the drainage, that's going to be something that's still for us. Dealing with, in the macro sense, global warming, that's not Bay Harbor. Bay Harbor is not going to dictate terms to the rest of the country or the rest of the world. That being said, We do try and work, and I can tell you right now, the members of council, or several members of council, do work very hard up in Tallahassee trying to obtain funding from the state to actually supplement our own funding to deal with drainage, deal with water issues, deal with traffic. We make a very strong effort, and quite honestly, we have a very outsized effort for a town of our size up in Tallahassee. So it's a little bit of everybody. I don't think anybody can push it to the next party.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ruthfield, any question?
The one area that I think the only place we could actually try to get some money is from the state. The cities are surrounding us are sure not going to help us because they don't have the money to do it either. Maybe we could get at least the state to consider giving back the 8% that they're collecting from the causeway to help with the traffic problems. 8% is a lot of money when you count up the total that's collected in tolls. No, is it going to solve all the problems? Of course not. Is it because they have costs too? I mean, we've got to be realistic about this. But can we possibly get more money from the state? Can we possibly get more money from the federal government? It's possible, but unlikely. We're going to really have to take care of ourselves. And that's where we have to concentrate, is taking care of ourselves.
Thank you. Mr. Ikochi?
Everyone's responsible. Everyone is responsible, whether it's municipal, county, state, federal. Everyone is responsible for the maintaining of our country as a whole. And I think having those partnerships are really important. No, is one particular entity going to do the lion's share over another? Potentially. It's like my grandmother always talked about marriage. It's never going to be 50-50. Sometimes it's going to be 60-40. Sometimes it's going to be 90-10. But you're going to get it done at the end of the day. And that's really what it boils down to. We need to work with every other entity that we possibly can to maintain and continue to be innovative, ultimately. I think to shut the door and say, you know what, no one's going to help us is really not the position of someone who's in leadership. And to be fair, I think Bay Harbor is a leadership community. We are a community that has tried to do things better, faster, stronger, and with more innovation than anyone else. And we can continue to be that. Maybe we are the first community that has certain things that we do that address these issues that is at the cutting edge. Maybe we are those people. And I think that that's the commitment that we need to have. We need to do the research. We need to think really hard. And at the end of the day, we need to do what we think is best.
Okay, thank you very much. So this will be our last question before closing statements. Yes, just looking at the time. And it's about your vision. What do you see, or how do you see the town in 3 to 5 or 10 years? What is your vision for the town? And we will begin with Mr. Ikochi.
It's funny that you had the reminder. It's Tricoci. It's Tricoci. It's fine. You're going to go to sleep tonight thinking about my last name. That's what's going to happen. I think in 3 to 5 years, we are going to be a community with a developed Cane Concourse. I think we're going to be an active pedestrian community. I think our school is going to be expanded. I think we're going to have a lot more programs, and we're going to be continued to be known as a community that provides for services and is open to community leadership and participation. I agree with what was said here. As I've been knocking on doors, there are so many wonderful ideas that come from the community. They are the ones, and we are the ones that are walking every day in our community. We're utilizing the services that are here and saying, hey, I noticed this, or this happened, or I think it would be really great if we had this. And I want to see and cultivate more of that. I think that there are a lot of residents who don't come to the meetings, and they're reticent to share what's going on. And we need to really work on that. And I think that is something that is going to change as time goes on. I think having that community space is going to provide that area where people are going to come together and work. I think we are going to continue to be a community that is about the community, which is really important to me, maintaining that hi neighbor, how are you sense. still having the boy next door knock on my door and ask me if I have 2 red apples and 2 green apples. I think that those are going to be the things that we are able to maintain even as our population increases. And that's really how I see us. I see us maintaining our community, increasing our capabilities, and just maintaining our excitement about moving forward.
Great. Mr. Fuller?
Okay, I'm going to give you your answer on that one in 1 second, but I was going to let Paul get past on one thing. I got to mention one thing, which is correct, because Paul keeps repeating the 8% the cost. Just so you know, Paul, by going over to the Sunfest, we saved $1 million a year for the town. That's the difference in cost. We actually saved $1 million. That being said, vision for the town 3 to 5 years from now, I got to tell you, I want everybody around all the other communities to say, how did they do it? How did they manage to create even a more perfect place than they already had? How did they manage to make sure that their security is still the best? How did they manage to revitalize King Concourse? How did they manage to make it so the school is still fantastic and traffic has not gotten worse? How did they manage to finish, hopefully get rid of most of and finish most of the construction, have the town beautified? How did they manage to offer all kinds of programs at their community center? How did they manage to have a wonderful, vibrant library? How did they manage to increase their parks? How did they manage to have a situation where people can walk up and down the streets at night and be completely safe? How did they manage? And it's going to be real simple. We're Bay Harbor. We know how to do this. We can do it. Citizens will continue to become involved, and we can do this.
Thank you. Mr. Ruccio?
Vision. Vision is a big word. A visionary is someone who built this town. When he traded some income-producing property in Miami for 2 mangrove swamps, nobody could figure out what in the world was he doing. But he had vision. He had vision to develop a community that would be a diverse community. He had the vision to develop a community that would be known as a community leader. He had the vision to see what Bay Harbor could become. The council today has to have that same kind of vision. They have to put in place programs that may get some flack from. They have to have the vision to support those things that in the long run will help the community in all areas. They have to have the vision to make this community back to what it is, what it was. Vision, sometimes you have to look backwards before you can look forwards. And I think one of the things we have to do is look backwards to see what we were. And now let's work to get us back in the position we were in the future.
Great, thank you. So that concludes the questions portion of the forum. And before we move on to closing statements, I just want to thank all of you for being here with us tonight and for participating in the forum, both the candidates and the residents.
You didn't read my card. I have a question I want to answer.
Which was your, please. Okay. Okay, so, do you want me to wait? No, okay. So, thank you again for participating and for being here this evening, and thank you for the residents who took their time out of their evening today to be a part of this today. So, what we'll do is, since we began opening statements with Mr. Fuller, why don't we go backwards, if that's okay? And begin closing statements with Ms. Tricoci? Is that okay?
It's up to you guys.
Okay, all right, so, I got a time start.
So again, I moved here a week before I had my twin boys for the safety, the sense of community, and everything that makes Bay Harbor really special, and that's the commitment that I have to this community. I am extremely interested in protecting and expanding the green space, demanding responsible development, delivering innovative solutions on traffic and parking, supporting our local police, and expanding educational opportunities and resources. Keeping this community, the special community that it is, while being innovative and constantly looking for solutions, right? So looking for solutions, being brave, and allowing them to fail, or allowing them to be knocked down, or allowing them to be brought to life within this community is really important. And that's something that I have a large commitment for, is setting things out and really working forward to get them done. I would greatly appreciate your vote. Again, this is a volunteer position, and I would be so honored to be able to serve this community in this fashion. Please come out on April 5th and vote. Again, my name is Elizabeth Tricoci.
Okay, thank you. You actually had 3 minutes. We only had 2 minutes on the clock, but you finished anyways within the 2 minutes, so my apologies. My timekeeper there we go. So now, Mr. Rootfield.
Having lived in this area for a long time, I've seen this area change for the better. But I really have a concern about something else. Something that many politicians in this area don't really honor. And that's full disclosure. I believe when somebody offers themselves for election, they should allow full disclosure about everything they are and were. They have chosen to offer themselves for election, and with that comes a responsibility of being truthful, neither by omission or commission, to dodge that truth. And if those of you question what I'm saying, just think about it. Think about what I'm saying. There are also endorsements that will be coming out. I assure you, they won't be for me after I finish this, that are really coming out by false organizations. They really don't have an organization that's been formed and does anything for the community outside of attempting to build their own power. There are not official organizations of this city, of town. They have very few members. And they seem to grow their members just before an election. But they don't have them the rest of the time. I won't get specific, no. I trust that the citizens of this town will recognize who they are and will take the appropriate action when it's time to vote. They endorse those who will do their bidding. And that's their big key. But again, the people that put themselves up for election should offer full disclosure.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Fuller, closing statement?
Thank you. First of all, sir, just so you know in the back, I'll be happy to answer your question afterwards. I know that you had another question. I'll be happy to answer it afterwards. First of all, again, I have to thank the League of Women Voters. Hosting this every year is it's a wonderful benefit for the town, and again, I appreciate your assistance. To all the citizens that are watching this at home, and the citizens that have been kind enough to come out today as well, thank you. We appreciate you getting involved. And I applaud your dedication to Bay Harbor Islands. This forum tonight enforces the notion that we're lucky to live in Bay Harbor Islands. I mean, quite honestly, all the candidates here tonight, and Doris, who unfortunately medically was not able to be here today, all love Bay Harbor Islands. We're all dedicated to bettering this town. And I got to tell you, every question that's posed here is answered, hopefully honestly, by everybody. And we're doing so again because we believe in this community. This is home. There's a reason we do this. We've repeated it multiple times tonight. Nobody here gets anything, you get $1 a year, which you donate back. You do this out of love of town, love of community, love of making sure this is where your family and where your loved ones are going to be raised. That's it. It's as simple as that. And it's incredibly important that everybody remembers that. You know, we have a unique situation here. We have a small town that's sitting in the middle of a major metropolitan area. We've got all the benefits of having that small town, knowing your neighbor, knowing the police, knowing everybody up and down the streets, understanding you can walk to whatever you want to walk to. And at the same time, you have all the different services of a large metropolitan area within, well, I would say the traffic when you leave Bay Harbor gets worse. So within a short drive or longer drive recently. We have to protect that. I've always maintained my support for the police and for protection and for services for Bay Harbor Islands, and I will continue that commitment if you're going to honor me again with another term. I very much appreciate that commitment, and I'm asking the commitment from you to please help me do that. I ask your help to serve you. That's all I'm asking. Please come out April 5th. We very much appreciate you participating in the process, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to clarify the question, I actually just now understood the question. The question that the resident had is why the residents do not get the chance to vote for the mayor. I believe that is a charter issue. And if that change needs to be in the charter, then that is something that can happen, but it's not a decision that is made by one person.
Right.
But that we were not clear on how the question was written, but just now in the conversation we realized, and if anybody would like to address that quickly, we'll be happy, so that the resident doesn't think that we were not trying to answer that question. But the question is, why Bay Harbor residents are not allowed to elect their own mayor?
I'm happy.
Is everybody okay with just answering that? I will go on one round. And I apologize because I just now realized what the question was. And we've got a minute to respond to that.
Josh, since I brought it up,
You can start.
discussion, I'd like to start and say, one of the reasons being is you are very correct. There would have to be a change in the charter. However, in their infinite wisdom, the council disbanded the Charter and Ordinance Review Committee and said that they would not have another meeting of it for 10 years. I think that can be changed.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Fuller, would you like to address it?
I'd be happy to.
Go ahead, I'll go
This
for
is,
you.
the fact of the matter is the charter and ordinance no longer exists, the committee no longer exists temporarily. That portion is true, because we had redone the charter. It costs the town money to have that committee. We actually have to bring out outside counsel, we have to start meetings, and rather than sitting around with something where we don't come back to the charter every year and pay those dollars, there's no reason to use taxpayer funds for a committee meeting that doesn't have any purpose at that point. That being said, when we come back around for the next revision, it is something that can be addressed. It's just there's no reason to spend money from the taxpayers just to spend it.
Thank you.
I think this is one of two issues that we continue to hear about, right? One of them is the term limits, and the other one is the elected mayor. And ultimately, I think it's up to the voters to make that decision. If they want to have an elected mayor out of the pool of council, then that is something that the voters, I think, should have the opportunity to make that decision on. That is one...
Right away from the beginning, that's what I'd like to know. How did that even happen? Oh, okay. Well, how did that even happen?
Okay.
So again, I think that it should go to the town for them to vote on it.
Put it on the April 5th ballot.
Okay, thank you very much, and we apologize for the additional round of questions. But yes, it is something that if the citizens want done, they can. And I would just make appointments with the elected officials as they, that are currently elected, to change and form a charter review committee. Those are things that can happen if the citizens want it. they will have to address the council, and that's something that there's a process for. So again, I thank you very much for allowing us to be here this evening. I want to thank Maggie for being the moderator, and each one of you, and all of the residents that are interested in making things happen, and that were here this evening. On behalf of the League of Voters, thank you very much.
Thank you again. Thank you. Good luck.